Hi.
All
Can you
right.
hear me?
Hello. Hello, Marla. Welcome to the Edge
Hello,
Television
Daniel.
broadcast. Sounds
Thank you.
great, Marla.
Thank you.
Hey,
You
well,
kind
welcome
of
to the
okay.
program. And of course, tonight we're going to be talking about your book, American Psychic. But man, you got an awesome story, and I just think it's really it would be a great thing for people in our particular audience to hear your story and how a singular event, maybe multiple events, change your life. I always look at life-changing events and transformations as something intriguing. Really, it just tells you that our courses aren't always set in the way that we think they should be. And when something comes along and has a tendency to alter our course, I'm always interested in that. So, Marla,
Okay,
why don't we
sure.
just begin with back in time, what you did previously, and let's work through it. And then
Okay,
how your life
sure.
changed?
Okay, great.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that last part of your
Oh, I'm
question.
sorry.
Sorry.
Well, we were talking about you. Go ahead and talking about how your life changed, what you did before your life changed.
What before what? Well, I kind of need a little reference here, Daniel. I'm sorry. I misunderstood you. You mean before my life changed, what happened? How I was leading my life, etc.
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about,
Yeah.
sir?
Right.
Okay, great. Well, life-changing events happen for all of us. And the thing that really shook me up and made me write this book, American Psychic, is the fact that I was an actress. And part of the reason that I was an actress is because as a child, I had to survive my mother. My mother was very abusive. And I thought if I could get into the television set because she loved that TV so much, maybe I would survive her and she would love me and not hurt me. So I made it my whole life destination, basically, to get on that television, become a successful actress, to make my mother happy so she wouldn't hurt me. And that was the trajectory that led me through my youth, and I became a successful actress before this other incident happened.
Hmm. Um, so you had an abusive mother. Where was the father in that?
Well, my father was a World War II veteran, and he came back in the late 40s in a body cast. So he actually had to leave being a military person. He had to leave because of his injuries, and he became a feed salesman in Pennsylvania. So he was actually an alcoholic.
Hmm. So he wasn't able to sort of help you through that situation.
Well, correct. I mean, my when you have someone that has gone through war, and I think that most of our listeners understand this, the we have a real problem in our society with veterans who come back that don't know how to take care of what has happened to them. And that's exactly what happened to my father. Most men from World War II and even Vietnam and Korea, they're medicating with something. And that's what happened to my dad.
Hmm. Um, do you care to describe any of the types of abuse you suffered?
Well, we're not sure exactly what was wrong with my mother. It wasn't as though she went to be diagnosed. But the point is, she was medicating with Darvocet and also Valium. She wasn't a drinker, but she had rage episodes where she would physically abuse me. And there are other things in the book that I think detail more of what happens in that situation. But suffice it to say, it was trauma, and it was having to navigate that trauma. I mean, most of our listeners understand that when we are traumatized as children by a parental figure, we're just trying to survive them. We'll do anything we possibly can. And, there were a number of years where it was very upsetting to me that I would listen to her, or I would side with her when she was being racist or when she was talking poorly about people. I did anything I possibly could to survive her hurting me.
Hmm. And this went on from what age to what age?
Well, one of the first incidents I remember at the age of 3 was being cinched into the high chair, tied to the high chair, and I remember it like it was yesterday. She went to the cupboard and got something out of the cupboard that was black, and she put it on a spoon and she shoved it in my mouth. And that was actually pepper. And thank God I didn't inhale it, but basically I was screaming. I could not get out of the high chair. And that was one of the first incidents that I actually remember.
Hmm. So her rage problems, she's just kind of played them out on you as.
Yes, she did. My sister was 11 years older than me. So by the time I came around, she was going through adolescence and then she went away to school. So whatever was going on between my mother and my father or about my sister, there were things that were happening in the adult world that I was not privy to. And instead of being able to work those out or talk about them, she unleashed her rage.
Mm. Interesting. I'm going to talk. I'll give you some triggered abuse memory here right now because I saw in the live chat somebody's talking about castor oil. I remember when I was young, I took something out of the cupboard I wasn't supposed to. My mom made me have a teaspoon of castor oil.
Mm-hmm.
I thought,
Yeah.
damn it, man, that's nasty.
Right. Well,
So I
that's
don't know.
nasty, but,
Maybe it wasn't abuse.
it's
Maybe it's not abuse. Maybe that's just good punishment. What do you think?
Oh, I think that that's completely abusive if you're giving something. Well, castor oil, it was considered medicine in some way. It might taste bad,
Mm-hmm.
but when you're putting Tabasco sauce or pepper in, I mean, if I had inhaled that, I would have been in the hospital.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So
And I don't think, excuse me, but I don't think that fly swatters, hairbrushes, and yardsticks are the way to discipline a child.
mm, um,
Do your listeners feel that way? Because I'm not one of those people that is going to support that after what I survived.
mm,
And of course,
mm,
years and years and years
mm,
of therapy to understand this.
mm,
And then there was something else that she did that was just incredibly abusive that I won't discuss on the radio, but it's in the book.
mm.
And it's the most bizarre sort of manipulation. Some of your listeners very well may understand the movie Sybil. Sybil was a movie with Sally Field, and there were some very disturbing things that the mother did to Sally Field. And I'll just leave it at that. I'd like our listeners to pick up the book and go through it and understand what happened to me.
Mm. As I have the cover of your book in our background right now, I see your face, obviously there is your face. But what is it with your right hand over your right eye?
Well, the first half of the book is called Blind Sight. And blind sighted means, it's a medical term that means a blind person who has the ability to perceive a light source. And I think that we have all struggled with that. And the first part of my book literally is not being able to see my way out of some very dangerous situations. And then it goes into my childhood where I'm basically trying to understand what I couldn't understand. And it's the first part of the book where I was struggling to be able to see through the darkness that I had been brought into. And the second half of the book is called Insight. And that's when I started getting help for the trauma, and that's when all the psychic awareness started to happen. And I was trained by the U.S. military psychic spies, and then I became an ongoing student of the Monroe Institute. And it's when I basically am with James von Prague, and he proves to me that I am a medium, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's working with law enforcement, and it just takes off from there.
Mm-hmm. I see in the live chat, it looks like somebody said their mom used a belt or a ping pong table, and
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
hot curling irons was an issue. But by the way, I mean, since people may feel like they need an outlet, certainly we can use this show. Marla, this show has two chats going on, one on the website, one on our live streaming YouTube channel. So if
Great.
either of those chats want to just say some kind of crazy abuse you felt like just a quick one-liner, what happened to you, because I would imagine a lot of people have had some abuse, but
Absolutely.
and sometimes it's just good to say it. I mean, maybe there's some healing in
Oh,
that.
I think so. Absolutely. I mean, that's really one of the reasons I wrote the book. I had to bear witness, and I'd like our listeners to really hear me on this. As a psychic and as a medium, I've learned through accessing the other side that the other side can see, hear, and feel us. And sometimes it is their healing dynamic of witnessing how we struggled with how they treated us. It's as though they have to bear witness to what happened what they did. And it literally was part of writing the book where I know that my mother, who was on the other side, basically had to see, hear, and feel what I experienced because I talked about it and I wrote about it. And I believe it is in that experience where the transformation happened for my mother and how she also healed.
Mm-hmm.
I was able, of course, to forgive her, and she could finally forgive herself.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of any good healing does include forgiveness, and sometimes it's very difficult for people. Marla, how do you, if you were to recommend, I know you're not a clinical psychologist or any other thing, well, maybe you are, I don't know, but I don't think you are.
Well,
but
well, I'll tell you.
You can prepend. You can.
Excuse me. I don't have a license, but I've spent enough time. I'm my own armchair therapist around this work. But I've spent 25 years in therapeutic studies, healing the trauma and grief, and also I've been trained for 18 years in life coaching. So I've done my due diligence. And when I come up against something, Daniel, I seek assistance for anyone, any facilitator to assist me, because that's really how this all got healed.
All right. And we'll definitely get deeper into the subject. So my question then, with that being said, for those who have a hard time forgiving, and I've over the years, this show's been going on since 2004, I've heard an awful lot of comments from people, and a lot of them involve abuse of one kind or another. Some people have never forgiven who is the cause of that pain. So what would you consider the first step in that path for somebody to have forgiveness?
Good question. Well, I actually think, from my experience of working with Brian Weiss and being regressed in various lifetimes, I believe I chose my parents. I actually feel that I could hear the cries of my mother in some place in my consciousness. I believe I chose them. So there's something about agreeing to come in for these soul lessons, and there's lots of things that happen to us. One of the things where the first betrayal really is in a child's life is someone that was supposed to love us didn't. That's the biggest core wound, and the child reacts immediately to that. It's a visceral response to someone who was supposed to love us didn't, and that's where the trauma actually starts. So when you figure out that everyone's life is like this on some level, that we must absolutely integrate these experiences to see that the person that was the perpetrator, oddly enough, even in their own mental illness, was in so much pain themselves that they perpetrated something upon us. And it is understanding that, being on both sides of being the victim, the perpetrator, that's part of what the book is about. It's the dance of victim and perpetrator. And that dynamic, once you understand that you too are capable of heinous behavior, you start to understand that you must forgive, because you are the one that is held prisoner by that perpetration unless you do forgive.
And that also seems to be a sort of a second victory. The first is the power, and almost in a sort of a, they say, and I may go into some weird area and you can check me if you want to, but I mean, I've heard that rape is not about sex, it's about power. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but at least I've heard that. So I would think that then abuse would be in that same strain, and then if it is allowed to fester, it is a continuing effect of that power over you.
Well, that's a really good point. Yes, narcissists have a certain frequency that they must have power, they must be right, they must perpetrate on other people. And as soon as you become part of a victim of that, you must learn to take a stand for yourself. Part of my book, there's stories in it. There is a rape. There's a Me Too story as well. It was a Me Too before the Me Toos were even a Me One. Wow. So there is a dynamic in there of having to stand up to the narcissism. And my mother was a narcissist. She was a wounded person, but that's how she tried to handle things, by controlling everything. And that is what we as children come up against, and we must learn to stand up to those perpetrators. I'm sure that you've got some things on there in the chat room that people understand exactly what I'm saying.
Well, I'm sure they are. And I was going to ask for those that say, "Well, I'm glad I didn't suffer any of the abuses you're describing, or maybe even that I describing." That castor oil is pretty dangerous stuff, man. But anyway, don't believe me. I can go a little deeper than that. I may need some healing myself before it's all over if I don't shut up. But but are there any perfect families out there where there isn't? Is typically most people have something in their past like that maybe they either blocked out, or are there perfect families? I mean, you dealt with Hollywood. I mean, I think of the Cleavers. I mean, there are several of the older shows that you just know those are perfect lives. You know, Andy Griffith is always, although nobody was ever married in Andy Griffith. I got to question that. So, you know,
Well, that's a really good question, Daniel. Well, here's the thing. Loss is the game changer. And we have every family suffers loss, whether it's loss of money, loss of home, loss of health, loss of finances, and then there's death. So no one has the perfect family. I think that most of us understand that television came around at a time where we needed to think that, what was on TV was real. We'd just been through World War II. I mean, the family dynamics of needing to see, funny things, family dynamics. And we were taught that that might be reality. Well, it wasn't. There was a lot of pain. I mean, I grew up in South Central Pennsylvania, and the neighborhood that I grew up in, very pretty houses, very lovely people, but there was some real cray-cray going on there. And that was a lot that had to do with the medication that these poor fathers and mothers were doing to themselves. They didn't have therapy back then, or they weren't looking into therapy. They weren't looking into AA. They were just perpetrating on each other and the children.
Is that anywhere? Were you anywhere near Allentown?
You're cutting out. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Were you anywhere near Allentown, Pennsylvania?
No, South Central Pennsylvania. It's in between nowhere and nothing. It's exit 11 on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. It's Bucolica. It's Norman Rockwell. The closest metropolitan area right now is Altoona.
One of the chatters asked a question, and we're going to interject these questions as we go. Marla from DC, Doug says, "Was your mother an actress?"
Oh, no. No. She was, remember, I was born in 58. So even though I don't look my age, yes, I was born in 58. But my mother was, she was born in 1919. So she was the daughter of I guess you'd have to say, a tobacco farm man from North Carolina, small little tobacco farm, where basically you were still utilizing people to help you on the farm. And she wanted to get out of there, post-depression child. And at that point in time, she was basically a sales girl in a department store. And my father came along during right before World War II and swept her off her feet.
A comment came in for you. It says, Have you ever had symptoms of dissociative disorder because of the severe abuse?
Absolutely. And that's partly how my psychic abilities were developed. My remote viewing skills were perfect for disassociation. Actually, there's an incident in the book where I hurt myself, and I was in the house across the street, and the man who was there was an OBGYN. He was examining me. And as he was examining me, I left my body and I went back to my home and went into the Wenduel, which is a place that's kind of dark. And this is where I had a family of toads. I remember going there. Now, I wasn't necessarily being abused at that time, but it was a very fresh memory because I had just had an accident, so there was trauma. But as things were being done to me that shouldn't have been done, I would leave my mind, go through the ceiling, out through the attic, and look into the houses of other people to see if I could get in. And that disassociation is exactly what we're able to do when we bilocate as remote viewers.
That also seems like that's the what I've seen or heard on this program about near-death experiences where somebody would leave their body, but they would typically stay in the room. But you're suggesting that you were able
Yes.
to go in other areas. Were they
Yes.
local to you, or were they?
Yes, they were local to me. I didn't leave my home or to go anywhere on a plane or anything until I was 11 years old. So it was just driving around within possibly 300 miles of where I was raised, but I didn't have access to any other way of leaving. So this bilocation, or sending our minds as psychics, we are able to bilocate our minds in an altered state to see and describe certain things. That's what the whole remote viewing community had taught for years in their own way during Stargate, between the 60s and the 90s, the Stargate program.
Has anybody that's been able to remote view actually helped the military?
Well, yes, the military psychic spies were exactly what I was telling you. There was a faction of the military between 1960 and 1990, men and women who were selected for various reasons through the military to do this work that was developed by Ingo Swann and Stanford Research Institute. And this remote viewing project was called Stargate.
And is any of the information from the movie Stargate or the series Stargate come from any of those experiences?
No, but there was a movie called Men Who Stare at Goats with George Clooney, and the character that George Clooney played was actually Lynn Buchanan, and Lynn Buchanan is one of the Stargate remote viewers that I was trained by.
Are you familiar with MK Ultra or Project Pegasus?
Yes.
Do they relate to anything that you've done?
Not that I know of.
Do you feel like in any way you were recruited?
Oh, Lord, no. No, not at all.
In a kind of a darker note here, this question came in. Now, obviously, you have a connection to Hollywood, and it looks like you've been in a lot of sitcoms, and there has been.
Yeah.
The internet is really full of, and I guess you could call them conspiracy theories, but all conspiracy theories seem like they have I'm just prefacing the question, have a little bit of truth to them.
Sure.
It says, and I know I've seen it because it comes through my Facebook feed a lot of times, or I'm out somewhere on some obscure website and it'll come up, and not porn, but regular. It says, is Hollywood?
Thanks for clearing that up, Daniel.
Could just say,
it's not porn for you.
As cowboys are clean living, ma'am.
Yes. Yeah. I've been watching some of those cowboy programs. Go on.
Anyway, it says, is Hollywood full of pedophiles or sexual abusers? Now, we know we got Weinstein.
It's so interesting. I am very curious about this whole subject. I mean, I came out to Los Angeles in 1989. And I started working right away. Seinfeld, Married with Children, Everybody Loves Raymond, dozens of shows, and I was recurring on the Superman show with Lois and Clark. I was never subjected to anything around that. I never heard about it. I never saw anything. Maybe, I wasn't, maybe I needed to work some more, but I did dozens of commercials, and I never heard anything about this until after, I'd have to say it was started around the time that Bill Clinton was being impeached, because I never heard anything about it. And I'm sure that there are stories out there, but I can't give any experience from my experience that I knew anything about this. There's that young girl that was on the latest Superman show, and I find that one of the most heartbreaking stories ever. I had no idea about this. Of course, I didn't work with her, nor did I work on that show, but I felt it was amazing to see that this girl had, sort of been, what's the best word? Brainwashed into bringing these other girls into this dynamic. And I don't really think I should speak about it because I don't know enough about it, but I'm sure that there are things that are going on. I mean, my God, it goes on in the Catholic Church. I'm sure it could go on in Hollywood.
Yeah, and obviously, I think she was recruiting of some kind. I mean, I don't know if there's again. I wonder if Hollywood tells on itself with shows like Eyes Wide Open, things like that. Maybe that's I don't know. There
You
just
mean
seems Eyes Wide Shut.
eyes wide shut?
Eyes Wide Shut. There seems to be a little
Um,
tinge of a dark underbelly there. But you're saying from your standpoint, you didn't see any of that.
well, no, I didn't see any of that. But however, you know, eyes wide shut, there are factions of that going on around, I think that the internet and our access to anything, I mean, you can turn that on the internet anytime you want. So we have access to lots of different kinds of debauchery. That wasn't part of my work out here. I didn't hang out with crowds like that. I wasn't much of a partier. When I was working, that was great. But when I wasn't working, I was training to work, or I was helping heal myself. This was all part of my life until the mid 90s when I was actually stalked. And I was stalked by someone, and that's when all this psychic stuff started happening. And I was down on my hands and knees praying to be protected. And then all of this amazing psychic functioning started happening. And it was basically out of fear. And I ended up going to law enforcement for help. And I, in turn, started helping law enforcement. So, I worked as an actress for a long time, and then all of a sudden this whole thing shifted in the mid 90s. And I left working as an actress in 2002.
This question is from Baby Wolf in the UK. So, did your
Good.
experience?
Hi, Baby Wolf.
Nice. All right. Did your experience as an actress help you with how you present your psychic messages, and do you think it makes it easier for the messages to be made up? Also, the use of religion clashes with. Does the use of religion?
Okay, hold on. Wait. Whoa. That's just stop right there, because that's a huge question right there. And before you get into religion, the dynamic of my work as an actress is a really good piece of information. Acting is basically listening and responding. I think that the way that my neural pathways were developed with the heightened being hypersensitive because I was abused, I think that I had to intuit how things were going to happen early on. My physical, emotional sensitivities were heightened. So when I started to playing around with being an actress at a very young age, it was learning to listen, learning to focus, learning to express myself. So I was being built for communication. And that communication started, the pathways being built. It's kind of like Bruce Lipton talks about our cells and how our cells we are part and parcel, developed by our environment. And when our cells start to develop, there's a way of listening and proteins that are developed. And we all have various degrees of this, but we are receptors. Our cells are receptors. Our brains are receptors and senders. So my work as an actress, I just don't have much fear about listening to information and sharing it, because that's what I'm doing when I'm working, whether I'm accessing psychic information, which, here's the backstory about this, folks. I'm accessing data. I'm going into data streams somehow through this larger consciousness system. It's possible for us to access data. So that could be about any aspect of your life. But my intention is always to give you information for your highest good. That in that data stream are also the consciousnesses of people who have been deceased. So my work as a psychic and a medium is basically accessing information and delivering it. So I'm listening and I'm communicating what I see, hear, and feel.
Do you have a conclusion that consciousness survives death then?
Oh, absolutely.
Where does that consciousness reside?
Reside? Well, that's a really good question, isn't it? This is the difference between materialism and determinism. This is, non-physical matter reality versus physical matter reality. It's my experience that I'm accessing non-physical matter reality and being able somehow to make it physical matter reality so we can see, hear, and feel it. And I think that we do that on a number of different levels.
Would that level include a hunch, intuitive, and being intuitive?
Okay, yeah. Okay, so for the sake of explaining even why I use the word psychic on the front of the book, psychic is psychic functioning. That's your brain and what it's able to do that's beyond what we can see. Consciousness, they have found, does not reside inside the brain. Now, I don't have all the data on that, but I work with physicists and scientists, and you all can, do some research on that for me and come back to me about it. But it is though the data is not inside of our brains. It's in some form of some context outside of the brain consciousness that we are all able to access, which is fascinating. It's kind of like God is the computer, we are the player, and we have avatars. So we have an avatar that's in this war game or this game on the computer, but we can't exist as the player unless we're part of the computer. This is kind of what Tom Campbell, who I've been working with, he likes to say that this is a virtual reality. And I suggest anyone who's interested in studying the science of this to look up Tom Campbell. He's got over 400 or 500 free hours on YouTube. And he's very helpful, helping make the paranormal normal.
Well, is the word psychic itself, is that just a matter of semantics? I mean, when you talk about, say, like a woman's intuition, that's kind of like widely known.
Yes.
I mentioned a hunch or maybe synchronistic events.
Well, yes. Psychic functioning is all intuition, all prophecy, all vision, all hunch, everything. That is psychic functioning.
Well, now, for some, as you're probably aware, that would have a negative connotation using the word psychic, but I've had intuitions myself that I've acted on. I had some that I didn't act on, and I wish I would have. So I mean, I would say that in that case there's psychic ability. I mean, it doesn't always have to be psychic. Doesn't always have to mean you're contacting the devil, does it?
Well, oh my God. Oh, I should just slap you for even saying that. Contacting the devil?
For some, first off, they would believe that, yes.
Okay. All right. Let me help you with this. Anybody that, we could look at all different kinds of different religions, cults, whatever. People tap into whatever they want to tap into because it gives them some sort of power. That's why they do it. People that are insecure or want power align themselves with cults. They align themselves with political figures. They align themselves with any kind of propaganda that gives them a platform of some sense of power. And that can include, a religious, it can include any kind of dogma. But tapping into consciousness is you can choose to go into something that hurts people or something that helps people. However, this all gets wrapped up in how people have utilized Bible verses, and this is something, I am not a Bible literalist. I'm interested in the New Testament. I'm interested in the light and the way shower of Christ coming in and showing us a different way. I'm interested in that the vibration of that Christ light and that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit triad of frequency. I'm very interested in that. The idea that the spin on the terminology of psychic, there's a great show out there, folks. It's on Hulu. It's called Shut Eye. And it actually is a purchaser can order it off of there or even through my publisher, Post Hill Press. Okay.
We'll be right back with you.
It began in the heartland of America. My spiritual journey of love.
The hour will begin to replay in our main player directly after the show. We'll put it up on our YouTube channel as well as our TuneIn radio playlist. Hello, Marla.
Hey, Daniel.
Very good. Well, I'll tell you what, in the first hour, you nearly smacked me, but I understand you wanted to smack me, reach through that camera there. But apparently you were God smacked, as you put it.
Yes, I was godsmacked. That's exactly right.
Tell us how that went.
Well, a couple of things happened. First off, when I was 14, I was had an accident with my horse, and right before the accident happened, I was basically warned that it was going to happen. I was basically on my horse. It was a thunderstorm, and I couldn't control her anymore. Someone had loosened the bit, the hackamore that I was using, and I could not control her. And you know what you do with a horse to spin it out, to stop it, you just spin her to one side or the other. And on the road that I was on, there was a barbed wire fence on the right side, and there were semi trucks on the left. And I thought, okay, I can ride her out, and I'm going to ride her into the barn. And I know that there is a tall pile of shavings. So she's going to dig her heels in, and I'll probably fly into that pile of shavings. And I heard, no, there's no shavings. Dig your feet in the stirrups and hold on. Now, that was shocking to me. I'd never heard anything like that before. And that's exactly what happened. I got to the barn, there were no shavings, and she dug her feet in, and I flew. And it was my right boot lodged deep in that stirrup that kept me from hitting the wall and probably killing myself. So that was the first incident. And then, of course, a few years later, it was the stalking incident that basically changed my entire life.
Oh, well, tell us about the stalking incident.
Well, the stalking thing happened where I outed a con artist, and he started to come after me. And that dynamic set a chain of motion in effect where I started to hear, see, and feel on an incredible level. And when that happened, I ended up, long story short, it's in the book, but I ended up working I was put in James von Prague's house. It's as though this divine Godsmack, this whole thing just happened in a sequence of events. And I didn't even believe in talking to the dead. That's the whole point. I was like, that's just crazy stuff to me. Mm-hmm. So when this all started to happen, I sought the counsel of clergy. I went to doctors, I went to therapists, and it literally was those U.S. military psychic spies that helped me through this entire ordeal.
Well, and for those, I've had this conversation a number of times about the subject of talking to the dead. I mean, as for somebody who would say, she'd never, ever, ever do that, but who would tell a grieving mother at a gravesite who's talking to their child in the grave, or their husband or their wife in the grave? And that happens all the time. It's just the way it is. And people talk to, who would go to them and say, you can't do that, or that's wrong of you. So if that is allowed, and we know it's not right to say something to them because they're grieving, they need to do this. So maybe we shouldn't so immediately react. Maybe we should have a measured response, perhaps a more thoughtful response to if somebody says they're talking to the dead, and look at the circumstances around that.
Well, I would never try and stop anyone in their grief process from going to the gravesite and talking to their deceased loved one. I would never. I mean, grief is grief. There is no manual. Everybody responds differently. I don't think that the dead person necessarily cares whether you go to the gravesite or not. Mm-hmm. The point is, it's all about the love. You can sit in your house, your car, you can be on the top of a mountain accessing your deceased loved ones through the chakra of your heart. The resonance of the love is what connects us, Daniel. Mm-hmm. So I think that the resting places are places where people feel comfortable going because mm-hmm. they need the opportunity to process their pain in any way. Mm-hmm. But I would never tell anybody not to do something like that. But I often have people, when I work with people in groups or situations, and I have a deceased loved one, and they said, oh, you brought me this or you brought me that. Well, I'm not there, but I'm glad that you think of me, and I really am happy that you invited me to Christmas dinner and that you had a chair there for me. Mm-hmm. All of it is about love. Mm.
Well, now you said something about that you read or you like the New Testament. Isn't there a story about Lazarus where he's dead and somebody says somebody's talking to him and said, how things up in heaven, and he says, well, there's a great gulf fixed, and you can't come here, and I can't go there. But it sounds to me like it's a conversation to somebody who's passed on. But you're not really talking to a dead person, because organically a person is dead. You are talking to an eternal consciousness. Is that what you're saying?
It is
of that
curious.
person?
I mean, these are semantics, but the process of consciousness surviving death is what we're talking about. And the consciousness, and this is great PR for God, Daniel, because this benevolent, loving consciousness we call God, this larger consciousness system, makes it possible for us to still be connected to our deceased loved ones. How that happens is miraculous in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Why that happens is to keep the bridge of love connected.
Mm-hmm. You said that as I played your trailer there in the halftime, that you were an actress, but then you found your true calling. Have you been able to help or suggest to others, or interview them in a certain way, or talk to them to help them find their true calling?
Well, yeah, of course. I don't know whether we've talked about this before, but I've been a co-host on a podcast called UnknownCountry.com's Dreamland since 2007. And one of the things that I've done is, of course, interviewed people about their books and their events all over the world. But it's in that process of understanding that there's so much out there that we can tap into. Now, when I work with people, it's my desire to help you learn to access your own intuition, access and train you in my own way. And I have taught before, but right now I'm doing this book. The book was launched on June 5th, so I'm still in the process of going around the country and working with people and talking about this book. But it is, I certainly basically would send anybody to any of the top people that I know. I have lots of people ask me, well, what do you think about this? And who do you feel about this? And I certainly implore people to learn to access their consciousness and their intuition in every conceivable way that is of right resonance and good.
Mm-hmm. So what you see, when I notice you have the preface there of right, so obviously there are nefarious individuals that try to tap into the opposite, the darker sides of our souls.
Yeah, well, they're just bored and they want power. What can I say?
Well, why? Well, Marla, why does it seem there's a whole lot more people in that realm than in the good side? I'm not saying
well,
that.
that just shows you how wounded people are.
Mm-hmm. Why can't we have a world where people aren't wounded?
Well, that's a good question. So let's go back to the whole conversation of wounds and trauma. When you're born into a family dynamic, you are not a racist. You don't hate as a child. You don't treat people poorly as children. You're a child. You are learning behavior at the hands of a couple of different people. You learn by your environment. And it is in the wounds of what happens to you in that time that basically you start to develop either fear or love, or aspects of both. Right?
Right. I would agree.
Yeah. So when we start to develop as adults and we're teenagers and, we get into a car accident because we drank too much, we go, oh, that wasn't too good. Or we treat somebody like our fathers treated us, or, or how our brothers slapped us around. We start to learn our own character. And we learn that that's not so great. We learn through shame. We learn through loss. We learn through, hurting other people. And it's our teachers, it's our family dynamics, and it's also, connection to source. And this is what's so great about churches. Churches are structures to understand connection to spirit. Now, there's a lot of men that want to control people, but we all have we could go out into the woods and that could be our church. We could be, we could find God and consciousness and that higher resonance any place. Don't you agree?
Well, I absolutely do, Marla, because I was kicked out of a church and threatened.
So tell us about that,
And
please.
I was kicked out of one and threatened with a lawsuit should I ever come back.
Well, how did that happen?
Well, it was the classic story of an internal struggle between the senior pastor and the psychologist on staff who evidently had designs on that church, and he counseled the pastor right out of his pastorship and started doing things that were undermining the church. And I sent out, in my normal cowboy way, I sent out
Yeah.
to every person in that church an anonymous letter. What do you think is going on in this church? And I got responses back. Well, they found out, they would say, what's going on? And it came back that it was, they called me into the church and said, hey, we don't like what you're doing. And I said, well, it's too bad. And so,
Yeah, you
but
spoke
anyway,
your truth.
the designs of men, and it was of power. And right
Yeah.
there, caused what I would say would be a spiritual woundedness. I was, because you go in there with the best of intentions and you work for the best of results and you want to help so many people. And when you see that there's manipulation in there on that level, there is a woundedness that takes place, and so there is physical abuse and there's spiritual abuse, and I consider it in that realm.
Absolutely. That's a really great point, Daniel. There was a situation a couple of years ago where I was working for some people who had narcissistic tendencies, and I was experiencing some of the same physical maladies that would happen when I was around other narcissists. When I was a child, I actually started vomiting. And that was really a unique thing because the woman who I was working for at that time was exhibiting similar behavior to my mother. And I started to vomit. And I went, oh my God, this is the response that I had to my mother's behavior. So I actually went to the Meadows Treatment Center. And this is one of the best treatment centers for various maladies of addiction and abuse. And I did their survivor program. And I was in that program, and I learned that there is not just physical, emotional, sexual, but there's intellectual and spiritual abuse. So there are numerous abuses. And once we've experienced that, it is up to us how we try and work through that. And I truly believe that if you do not work through it, then the physical maladies, our bodies start showing up. Gabor Mate wrote a book called When the Body Says No. And I'm sure that our listeners have had various maladies within their physical systems that are basically saying no to some of the treatment that's happened to them as children.
Well, it's interesting you say that. We had a doctor from the UK on this program a couple of years back, and his specialty was curing cancer. I don't say healing it. I say absolute cure. But what he did it without drugs. What he did was he addressed root physiological and psychological problems that were based on bad relationships, bad interactions, childhood stuff, and basically saying that is the source. And so he was able to do that without drugs. And so
who
many
was
cases.
this? Do you remember his name?
No, but somebody.
But you'll get back to us on that.
We'll get back to you on that one. I can't answer that right now. But no, we'll get back to you on that one there. But no, he said 35,000 cases, and so he has quite the list of. But anyway, based on that what's happened to you, your internal mechanism can cause these sicknesses. And so definitely they have to be addressed. I don't think they should be left around. But we got a number of questions. Let's get a couple more questions into you. It says, this is from Al Katz of the YouTube chat. Have you ever had an unpleasant communication?
Well, I have tapped into perpetrators who actually wanted to apologize to their victims. Now, and they basically showed me what they had done to their victims. That might And of course, I've worked homicide cases. So some people might think that that's unpleasant, but I see the merit to actually going through that. Have I ever encountered something that was frightening or that I wanted to run away from? No, because I actually feel deeply protected by the Holy Spirit.
All right. And here's another question. This is from Jerome Galvin. Marla, Is there been a symbolic role that you have played that has a part of your synchronicities?
I don't understand the question.
Yeah, that question needs to be reworded, Jerome. If you want to get back to us on that, definitely want to ask that. And I think one of the things I wanted to address was the synchronistic transformation. Explain that.
What? I didn't hear that. What?
Yeah, explain what synchronistic transformation is.
Did I mention that someplace? I don't remember using that
Well, you
terminology.
use synchronicities.
Yes, you mean in the transformation, or how
Yes,
synchronicities
how
are transformational?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I think that there's a couple of things here. First off, I think that in prayer, intention, meditation is very powerful. I think that my life has been a series of synchronicities, but I also believe that they've been answers to my prayers, not necessarily answers of the way that I wanted my prayers to be answered, but things that were in right resonance for my highest good. And once you start paying attention to that, you'll start to see synchronicities that you never even knew were there before. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the awareness that comes from paying attention to the intuition, the synchronicity, because once you start to pay attention to that, you start to see how magical and amazing your life is, which is the transformation of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that actually came from, I don't know, a bio we grabbed somewhere. Basically it says that you've developed psychic gifts and relationship with God on a synchronistic path that led to healing and transformation.
Yes, a synchronistic path. Yes. Once you start to see that your life has been in synchronicity to helping you transform, that's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's get another question here. It says, this is from Sansui from the YouTube. It says, have you ever asked Jesus to show himself to you?
Yes, that's in the book.
Wow. All right, so get another question here. By the way, this is probably a question you may not want to answer, but hey, we haven't caused enough ruckus.
I'll be able to say that. I'll be able to tell you that or not.
Okay, you were in Roseanne.
Yes.
Okay. What do you think about what's going on with her?
Well, it's interesting. I'll just tell you a little bit about that. What happened on that show for me. I was hired for 2 episodes. Crystal was the character who was one of Jackie's best friends. Crystal was marrying Ned Beatty in this particular episode, and I stepped on set, and I knew a couple of the people that were on the show. You know, when you're hired as a guest star on a major show like that, what you're doing is you're coming in to facilitate a storyline. And I was basically one of the best friends of the woman, Crystal, who was getting married to Ned Beatty. And when I got on set, I had all this dialogue, et cetera, and it was really fun. And then my dialogue was all cut, which was interesting. And I stayed there for the 2nd episode. And what was happening at the time is that she was going through real trauma with Tom Arnold. Mm-hmm. So the set was not pleasant.
Wow.
And I can't remember exactly what year that was. It was in the 90s. Boy, you could probably go into my IMDb or just go onto IMDb and see the Roseanne year that I did that. But she was having problems with Tom Arnold. So, and it was also, she had just made friends with a daughter, I believe her name was Mandy, who she had given away. So this was a daughter that she had, she'd had the child and given this girl away, and they became friends. So it was a challenging time. So I know what it felt like to be on the set during a challenging time, so I can only imagine what it was like for the other people. People have opinions, and I really don't really know what to say about Roseanne, except that she was very talented and she provided the opportunity for a lot of people to be employed. And, we really have to be mindful of our own internal hate.
In other words,
And
in
I'm
other words,
very interested in educating hate.
in other words, what you're saying is, judge not, lest thee be judged, or with what measure you judge, it shall be judged unto you. Well, I know ABC was pretty,
Yes,
pretty.
thank you, Matthew 7. I appreciate that.
Okay. Well, right there, I mean, right there is
Hmm.
two steps to healing, I would say.
Well, I think that what's key is looking at how we think. Once you start to pay attention to how you think every day, you'll notice how much you lie,
Mm-hmm.
how judgmental or critical you are, how you react, how you make a judgment inside your brain by watching somebody walking across the street, whether they, I have a lot of people from various different parts of the country, and I watch a lot of things on Facebook. There's an awful lot of comment on people who look different than you do, you know? I'm just referring to people making comments on
Right.
different skin color, different sexuality. That kind of behavior is inside of all of us to some degree. Good to pay attention to that.
Azur from the live chat says, as an actress,
What a great name. What a great name. I love that name.
as an actress in Hollywood, have you ever been approached to join the Illuminati?
Okay, well, that's interesting. First off, I don't act anymore. I ended that career in 2002. I wouldn't have known what an Illuminati was from an aluminum foil when I was working as an actress. I had no understanding what any of that is. And actually, there's so many different interpretations of what the Illuminati is. It's just another faction of people trying to understand a lot of different things regarding various levels of consciousness, just like what the terminology occult means. That has been linked to Satanism and things like that. And if you really look at what the terminology of occult is, it's far from what that actually means. So it's all interpretation. It's all about education. I'm not involved in any group or any kind of cult. I've been very careful to do as much education around everything that I stand for, what I feel, what I know, and there is no association with any kind of cult that I've ever been involved in. I don't think that the Lutheran Church would be considered a cult, would you?
No.
No,
No.
but there are factions of things, and I've studied some of these things. I mean, there's various authors out there that are very wonderful at, explaining a lot of the shadow sides. And I think it's important to understand what the shadow is and not to be frightened of it, just to understand it. Educate yourself.
The shadow knows?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. So, all right. So you were on a set. Now, if I get this right, just correct me, or get this wrong, correct me. You were on a set and you got a message about somebody's father. How did that go?
Well, actually, I was doing a commercial, and it was a Captain Crunch commercial. And I was, when you're working on a commercial, you get your outfit on, you sit down, and you meet the actor. And there was a guy that was named Mike who was playing my husband. And, you just get ready to do your job. And I sat down with this man, and he introduced himself to me, and all of a sudden, I went blind to my personal situation. This is also part of the blindsided aspect of what I write about in the book. Sometimes information comes in and I can't see what's in front of me. I'm seeing what's going on inside my head. And there was a deceased person who was showing me a crib, a baby's room at night. And I heard the way that I hear things. I'm so glad that he reads, or I watch him read the blue book to the baby every night. And I heard the director say, Marla, hello, get yourself together here. And I was like, oh, okay, excuse me. I was daydreaming, whatever. And I looked at the actor and I said, listen, Mike, something's going on here. And this is just when I had first started learning that this was happening to me. I said, Mike, do you have a baby? And he said, yes, I do. And I basically said, well, I've got a guy named Fred here who's telling me that he watches you read this blue book. And Mike broke down. he started tearing up and saying, Fred's my father. He died before the baby was born, and I've been so, upset that he doesn't see the baby. And I said, well, he does, because he watches you. And there was numerous things that happened in this, and I write about it in the book. But I mean, it was one of those experiences that Mike and I both today look at that and go, how did this happen? Did God give me this job so that I could sit there and talk to Mike and relay this message from his deceased father? I mean, these are the things that make me question this work all the time.
So you didn't ask for that to happen; it just happened to you. And you,
Yeah,
you say
no.
there was no premeditation, predilection, any kind of thing that led up to that.
No.
It just out of the blue.
No, absolutely. Well, and this is what's interesting. I don't go where I'm not invited, but I actually had to ask him at that moment if he would want me to share what was happening. That happens, it does happen. I mean, I was just relaying being in a cab a few years ago where I was stuck in traffic and I just wanted to get home. And the cab driver started talking to me about having been in his homeland at his mother's funeral. And I was like, oh my God, I'm stuck in traffic. I just want to get home. And he's talking to his deceased mother and talking about his deceased mother. And I started to see her. And I'm like, okay, we're stuck in traffic. Here we go. And I said, okay, was your mother's name Clarissa? He said, yes. And I said, well, she's very upset that your wife left you, but she's more upset that she got the crystal that she had given to you, and that she's so upset that you're using he was sleeping in a single bed, and his bed linens were Little Mermaid sheets that he had gotten on sale at Target at something. I mean, it was just outrageous what happened. And we spent the entire time talking to his deceased mother while we were stuck in traffic.
So how long after those events did you say, I'm kind of done with this, my acting career? I've got to do something what you might obviously consider more important.
Well,
How long did it?
well, yeah.
How long was that time period?
Well, that started to happen, this whole talking to dead business started in the mid 90s. And it was around 2001, 2002 that I knew that I really couldn't do this anymore. My agents were calling me and I didn't want to go on auditions. And there was one other time that I went back to acting. It was when I was married in that time, and my husband needed money for a lawsuit. So I went on Passions. I was hired as a nurse on Passions, and I think I'm lauded with being the longest guest star on a soap opera for that, or for Passions. I was on for 2 weeks, and I had to go back to make some money for my husband at the time. Mm-hmm. But yes, I stopped and really never looked back.
Has anybody from Hollywood called you up and said, hey, Marla, why did you go Shirley MacLaine on us?
Well, nobody really cares that I went Shirley MacLaine, because a lot of the people in Hollywood still work with me. I work with directors, producers, writers.
Have they approached you?
They come to see me.
Have they approached you to say, Marla, I know you normally talk to dead people, but can you tell us what may be the best plot so we can have the biggest audience, so we can make the most money?
That's exactly why they come to me.
They try to milk this thing, trying to get an edge. Do you accommodate?
I do.
Has it worked?
It has.
Wow. Okay. Hey, we want to get this show
there
syndicated
there are a
500
number
stations.
of television shows that are on based on my working with producers and directors and writers. Yep.
Well, we want to syndicate this broadcast on 500 stations.
I love that. Okay, good. Well, we'll talk another time about how to get more of an audience.
All right. Well, there you go.
I'd be happy to do that for you.
Okay. And well, this question here you've already addressed is, have you ever gone where you're not invited? So it seems like it has you're most effective where you're asked. There's permissions given for you to give your talks.
Well, here's the thing. I've learned that why would I want to go someplace where I'm not invited? Well, sometimes I'm pushed to do certain things. And I usually ask people. It's very rare that I've said, listen, I need to talk to you. But if I've done that, it's because in a group situation or someone has approached me about something and I really needed to tell them something. I was approached by TLC a couple of years ago to do a companion show of like the Long Island Medium out here in Los Angeles. And I shot the show, we cut the show, and one of the first things that they asked me was, will you get in people's faces? And I said, no, because I don't think it's appropriate. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. And, it is television, so it's sort of set up that when the Long Island Medium, and bless her heart for going out there and leading the way in many ways, but it's set up so that if she walks into the deli and has information for the guy behind the counter, she has already assessed that that's going to happen. And the deli guy has possibly already signed a release that he is going to be worked with. So, it's television. So there's editing and there's also setup, or people would not be able to share any kind of information unless they had signed a release.
Mm-hmm. Dreamwalker asked this question, says, Marla, if you died tonight and you found yourself at the pearly gates, God asks you a question. Mm-hmm. Why should I let you in here, Marla? What would you say?
Lord, I died. You wanted me home for some reason.
Now, once you are invited home, is it that can you come back again?
Well, I think that's a really good question because, I had to be educated in past life regressions. I mean, Brian Weiss, who is basically the foremost well-known person about past life regression, I've worked with him numerous times. Mm-hmm. And that experience will change your life. Mm-hmm. Once you've had a past life regression, that's really something to take a look at. Well, I've been around for a number of times. I've been around the block. Mm-hmm. I think that sometimes we have, and I do detail one of these experiences with Brian Weiss in the book, where I was shown that I had to come back, and I write about this, and I wasn't so sure that I wanted to come back, but the weirdest thing was that my experience with Brian Weiss was then reflected back to me when I stepped on the set of Everybody Loves Raymond. I went to work on that show, and one of the extras came up to me and said, oh my God, I dreamt of you. She said, I had a dream about you. And she took out a piece of paper and she showed me and detailed and drew the exact same thing that had happened in a past life regression with Brian Weiss about me choosing to come back here.
Mm-hmm. Years ago.
Excuse me. Yeah. Don't you find that incredible? I think that's kind of like an incredible experience. Here I'd been regressed by Brian Weiss. I step on the set of a major sitcom, and the first thing that happens is a stand-in on the show while I'm rehearsing comes up and says, oh my God, I dreamt about you. And she details this. I think that's pretty wild.
Well, let me ask you, in past life regression, is there ever any danger of the person that is reviewing that says to you, Marla, remember you had a little blue bicycle? And you go, yeah. Is there any possibility?
No. They're not telling you anything. Okay. The past life regression person that's working with you is not telling you anything.
Okay.
You are having the experience.
Okay. Well,
we've got to get you to have some regressions here, Daniel.
Wow.
We got to get you. We're going to have you. We got to set you up for a past life regression so you know how it happens. This would be great. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, first you got to slap me, then you got to get that past life regression.
I don't want to slap you. That was just in that moment.
I'm having fun with that. Hey, Marla, look. Years ago, I had a dream that there was this big water tower with a door on it, and the door opened up, and all the water came out. The next day, I was in a group of people, and I was telling a person that dream, and somebody from about 15 feet away, evidently was listening, came over there and said, what was that? And I told him the dream. It was a big water tower, and the door opened all the water. He said, well, I'm a developer, and I have a big water tower, and last night the door opened, and all the water came out.
Love it.
Now, is that psychic ability, or is that a dream, or is that tuning into the Great Spirit? What is
it's amazing. So you had that dream prior to encountering that person.
Yes.
It's like, okay, you were tapping into something that you didn't even know you were tapping into. That dream life accesses lots of information. You didn't know you were going to run into that person, but
No.
that's one of those synchronicities of basically to say to you, hey, Daniel, these dreams are prophetic. Pay attention.
Marla, what do you think synchronicities are? Are they lights along our pathway? Or is it saying that we know who you are, where you're going, and so here's our little
I think,
thumbprint? What is that?
yeah,
What are they?
I think it's all those things. I even laugh, when I'm led to look at the clock and it says 11:11. Just like all of our listeners are pulled to look at the clock, or we look at the TV and it has that on there, and that's our inner guidance system basically saying, "Hey, we're with you. We got your back. We're working together on this. This is a reminder."
Guest 279 says, Marla, have you had any, I'm sorry, that's wrong. DC Doug, have you had any spiritual upbringing as a child?
Yes, Doug. I was raised in the Lutheran Church. I spent baptism through Bible study and confirmation, and then, which I detail in the book, I met a young man who I kind of fell in love with, and he wanted to save me. He thought that I needed to be saved, and I went through that experience. I would have done anything at that time to help me with my mother, and I didn't know that there was this club called the Born Again Club, and I was wondering why my Lutheran people didn't understand that, and I accepted Jesus as my personal savior. And that was when I was 14 years old. And then that horse accident happened, and I heard that voice that saved my life. But I have also explored many different ideas. I don't have any problem going into any temple, any church, because I'm someone that is all about inclusion. I don't feel that you have to have a card-carrying club member of a certain group in order to access God or to access heaven. I believe we all have that access.
I was getting ready to, the next question was guest 279 says, earlier we asked, or somebody asked the question, have you ever asked for Jesus to show himself? And they said, what happened when you asked Jesus to show himself to you? I guess you never explained that.
Well, no, I didn't. And part of that is it's a pretty long story, but it's part of the culmination of the book. But when I did access Jesus, he didn't show up in the robe. He showed up in khakis and a white shirt. And when I said to him, "Are you Jesus?" he said, "Well, in order for you to see the Christ, the way that Christ really is, you would not be able to see it while you're in this consciousness. I'm showing up in a way as a representation for you, because it would be too much for you to see Jesus as Jesus is. I am showing up in a way that can make sense to you, because we don't want to really blow your circuits." And he revealed information after information after information to me, which was quite revolutionary. And I was more moved than I've ever been in my life.
Interesting you said blow the circuits, because we had a guest years back named Mary Kay Baxter, who said that she had a divine revelation of hell, and Jesus came to her, but she said he came to her 15 different nights, because he said that if he had showed her everything, he would have blown her circuits more or less. And so that's
there you go. Yeah, I never knew that either.
Wow.
So yes, it's the culmination of the book.
What have you been doing recently? Now, this book just come out, is that right?
Yeah, it came out June 5th. So wow, this whole book business is quite amazing. I don't have a publicist, so I have been blessed to have lots of wonderful people who have read this book and who have shared it with people, and it's gotten me interviews on all over, the country in various ways. I just came back from Chicago. I was on Fox News. Brittany Payton, Walter Payton's daughter, interviewed me. I went up to Milwaukee and I did Morning Blend with these really fun women on NBC. And I did a live program with a woman by the name of Jem Weigel at the Wilmette Theater, where we talked about spirituality and every kind of aspect of this. And I did a live group where I read the room. 100 or so people. And then I also went out to the Aurora Theater at the Paramount Theater, where I sat down with one of my oldest dear friend, who found me on a train in Chicago and put me in my first equity show as an actress. And he's the artistic director of the Aurora Theater. And I worked with the audience. It was a sold-out show, and I'm getting ready to go to my hometown in Pennsylvania and work with people. And then I'm going to Gaithersburg, Maryland at the middle of September to do some work. And I just am showing up where the doors are opening. Mm-hmm. And I'm just so grateful for the response that people have had about this book. I feel that my work is making sense in the world, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I get emotional when I even think about it, because the book is actually the greatest thing I've ever done. Although living it was pretty amazing, but the book's pretty special, and I'm so blessed to even be on your show. So thank you, Daniel.
You know, I've got a screenshot of your visit to the Morning Blend. I got to tell you, if I saw you, I probably wouldn't have got a screenshot if I saw one if you were on The View. I'm just saying. I probably wouldn't have used that one. I probably wouldn't use that one.
Well, I probably won't be on The View, but who knows? And if I do get on The View, I'll try and do some healing around that conversation.
Hey, see, you can turn a scar into a star, man. You can really do some. There's some work to be done over there, Marla.
Well, I really do think that it's all about perspective, and I have no interest in being part of groups that perpetuate any kind of hate in any way, shape, or form. And everybody gets really heated around some political aspects here. And I'd like to say that we have a situation where we are being given the opportunity to see many different things. And I believe that God's love gives us the opportunity to see behavior that we don't need, as well as change behavior that we do need. So when we have these opportunities, I think that we all need to take them. Hate is inside of all of us. And I think that's what we really need to take a look at.
All right. One quick question here from Roxy out of the YouTube. Says, Marla, have you had any visions that were wrong?
That we're wrong?
That we're wrong.
Meaning that we're wrong. Well, I'm not sure exactly what she means by that. If she could be more specific, that would be great. I do know that this is how we change, all right? I really believe that people are skeptical, and believe me, I was completely skeptical about talking to the dead. I was a huge skeptic, and I had attitude about it, and I wanted to prove people were wrong, and I was going to be an investigative reporter and go after people. But the point is, when you're so judgmental and you have attitude and opinion, God works in mysterious ways, and that's how I got God slapped, because I had an experience that changed my perception about everything. And that's how we grow up. And I have a suggestion to our listeners that we come to situations that we feel threatened by or angered by or judgmental by, and take a step back. And instead of being judgmental or so skeptical, be curious.
I got one of those rude awakenings. One time, I was going to go to a concert, and one of the guys walking around had really, really long hair, and it was a gospel concert. And I said, who's this joker with the long hair? And it turned out to be the lead singer. And I was thinking, wow.
There you go.
And he had and his message was so awesome that I thought, oh crap, man! I have got to. I check myself. You're right. There are things that sometimes, Marla, that we're actually programmed though to have negative reactions, and we got.
But that's the problem. That's the problem. That's the education. Yeah. That's why there's people that are racist. They were taught that. And I love that you shared that, because I found something on HBO the other night called Believer. It's actually a documentary about this incredible dragon. What's it called? Oh my God! There's a. I'm so sorry. I wasn't prepared for this. There's a group out there called Dragon something or other, but it's a Mormon group who basically is sharing tolerance about gays and transgenders. And it is an amazing documentary. I apologize for not remembering the name of the group. Somebody's got to be typing it to us right now. But It's amazing. And it's the struggle of this incredible lead singer who truly believes in unifying and compassion and love. And he's standing up to the Mormon church. It's extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. I just pulled it up on Google. Somebody looks like it says Dan Reynolds of Imagine Dragons.
Imagine Dragons.
What
Thank you so much. Yeah. It's wonderful. I mean, I get emotional thinking about it because it's, it's a younger generation, and they're the ones that are taking a stand for unity. And because they see and feel something different. And I think it's amazing.
Well, I'll tell you what, Marla, we're getting near the end of the broadcast. I'm going to give you this time right here to share your final thoughts. Anything about your book, you go right ahead.
Well, you know what? Thank you, Daniel. And I feel so grateful that you invited me to do your show. And thank you, listeners. American Psychic is my journey from the trauma of my childhood through the drama of an acting career into the transformation that changed my life. And it's a fast read. People are really enjoying it because it's a page turner. And anybody that goes on the ride with me will see their own lives, and they'll think about this and what happened to them. And it's my desire that when people read the book, they'll want to share their own stories, that they will find forgiveness or the wherewithal to take a look at some of the issues in their life, to take a stand for themselves, to find compassion and love for not just others, but for themselves.
You're not watching the show, I suppose, but there is one graphic that I put up occasionally, and it's from the Beatles, and it's the quote says, "And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make." And this show is all about trying to spread the love and try to get different ideas and thoughts where people are reaching out, try to make other people's lives better. So I commend you for that, and I hope everybody takes time to follow you and see what's going on.
I'd love to come back and talk with some people who have read the book, because I think that would be really helpful, and see what it did for other people, and see what we can do to help the world. So thank you so much.
Okay.